Hello there, this is Mark Smith with Family Tree Counseling Associates, and I have another video for you. It is entitled 10 Distinctive Clinical Differences Between a Narcissist and a Sex Addict. Many times the diagnosis that gets handed down from unenlightened therapists in treatment centers is some acting out narcissist. They're just a sex addict. They can't help themselves. They have a wounded inner child and they're needy, and they had too much pornography in their teenage years, and that's sort of the problem. But and there are many people out there like that. I'm not belittling that, but sometimes the correct diagnosis is borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, or antisocial personality disorder. And when I say narcissists in the title, I mean any of the cluster B people. I have been trained personally by Patrick Carnes, who is the leading expert on sexual addiction treatment on this planet. I have gotten some treatment for my relationship addiction and my narcissistic abuse stuff through Patrick Carnes' organization, and actually spent an afternoon in therapy with Patrick himself and with his daughter and with Paul Hartman, who actually set up the program there in Pine Grove. So I am well acquainted with the paradigm of sexual addiction, and I am not against it in any way, shape, or form. What I have concerns about is it took many years for the diagnosis of sexual addiction, to be accepted among therapists. 20 years ago, nobody would have known what that was. There weren't Sex Addicts Anonymous meetings. Patrick Carnes was starting to write books, but he was on the cutting edge of something new and different. Now there's something else that's cutting edge, that's new and different, and it looks very much like sexual addiction in many cases. And folks, that is just the tip of the iceberg. That's calling a house cat, that's actually calling a man-eating lion a house cat. The problem is much bigger. A correct diagnosis for anything is imperative if you're going to treat it correctly. If you go in to see the doctor and they run tests and they determine that you have a cold, they'll send you home and tell you to rest. But if you have cancer, you're sort of screwed, because you needed chemotherapy and you needed surgery pronto. But if you have the wrong paradigm, the wrong diagnosis, you're going to get the wrong treatment and you're going to die. The problem with a lot of people who have been wedded to a certain paradigm is everything that they're trained in, that they have a bias toward and a paradigm about, everything that walks in the door looks like that. If you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And my concern is there are treatment centers out there like the one who treated my former fiance, the Bridge to Recovery. There was the clinical director there, and she's well-meaning, good person, but was still in training for her sexual addiction stuff and probably didn't know a malignant narcissist from the man in the moon. And I want to help some therapists out there. I hopefully want to help some treatment centers out there. I certainly want to help spouses and significant others of psychopaths and cluster Bs. So I'm going to give you 10 distinct clinical differences between a narcissist and a sex addict. These aren't in any particular order. One is, with a cluster B person, there is a distinct, different, hidden, alternative self that's hidden. There's another person in there that's hiding. There's a dark, scary, dangerous person who is hiding themselves from you. That's not necessarily the case with sexual addiction. Yeah, there's the mind of the addict. Yes, when they're thinking about sex, that they sort of disconnect from love and they disconnect from their values, but it's not like this. Let me give you a couple examples of what happened with this woman. I've mentioned some of these. One of them was a year ago. It was March Madness, and I got home and I was summoned up the stairs to perform sexual connection with her. But it was March Madness, and it was 2 minutes left in the game, and I dilly-dallied and got upstairs in 20 minutes. I didn't think I was putting out a fire. But I got upstairs, and there was a woman up in the bedroom that I'd never seen or met before. She was all covered with makeup and wearing a negligee I'd never seen. Her eyes were rolling back in her head. She was playing pornography on the TV. And she was in a rage that I wasn't up the stairs quick enough to take care of business. That is a human being I had never seen before. You say, well, it sounds like a sex addict. Okay, that sounds like a sex addict. But there's also a time when she sat down and wrote out all of her sexual actings out, and she stood up and her mask was off. And it was very clear that the person that I thought existed never existed. And she handed me her cell phone, the keys to the car. She's basically saying, I didn't exist. I was just using you. I'm a con woman. Here's the real me. I wasn't yelling at her. She wasn't yelling at me. It was what it was. But there was a whole nother human being looking out at me and communicating with me. On the way of me driving her to the bridge to recovery, she went into a rage because she was tired of hearing my anger about her acting out. And I had to stop the car and take a break and get a meal. And I saw her sitting in the car, and she held her body differently. She held her body arrogantly and proudly and in a very sexual way. And that's not the person I had known. The thing is, with these narcissists, with her, when they disappear abruptly with their grand finales, they don't say goodbye. But the truth is, she never even said hello. I never even met this woman other than these brief flashes that I'm mentioning. A sex addict is like being drunk, okay? When you're drunk, you don't have a separate personality. You're just drunk and you're acting goofy. When you're a sex addict, you're under the influence of that addiction and you're doing things you don't normally do, but you don't have a distinct personality that's different. That's what's different. Number two, with a sex addict, if you marry somebody and their addiction hasn't developed, they loved you, and they probably still do. But if you get involved with somebody with antisocial personality disorder or a malignant narcissist, they never loved you. They were an imposter from get-go. And the sad thing is, folks, is with cases like this, there's two imposters. We see what we want to see, and we recruit who we need to recruit. I was a middle-aged guy looking for a hot young girlfriend, and I was naive in the ways of the world, and I needed to reenact being viciously abandoned and betrayed and used and lied to the way my mother did. So she was an imposter from the get-go, but I was an imposter the whole time too. I didn't know it. She knew it. I think sometimes she would lie to herself and tell herself, the bad person is the bad person, but I'm the good person. But the reality was, she was that other person who never loved me and did not care about my well-being. The third thing that's different between a sex addict and a narcissist is a narcissist has zero empathy. When I was under the influence of my relationship addiction about 10 years ago, and I was acting out in relationships, but when I interacted with my wife, I was tearful. I was apologetic. I was so sorry for bringing harm to her. I had a tremendous amount of empathy. In her case, it didn't really move her, but it was quite genuine and quite deep. Narcissists and cluster B people, they don't have empathy. It's all about them. You are an object, you are a thing, you are a resource, you are something to be ingested to feed them. You are narcissistic supply. Number 4, especially with the antisocial personality, but with all cluster B, there's an agenda. They either need attention, or they need money, or they need power. I think in this woman's case, she needed somebody to pay the bills, to take care of her son, but she also needed to be legitimized. Her 2 older brothers were successful. They had marriages, they weren't divorced, they had nice homes, whereas she lived in a shack. And every man who was with her got away from her within 2 years, 2.5 years. I was talking with her ex-husband, and he said, "You're the only one who stayed 6.5 years." And that was not a badge of honor. That was a badge of denial, rescuing, and masochism on my part. So they have a self-serving agenda where they go into it looking to suck the blood out of your neck, whatever the blood represents. Number 5, difference between a sex addict and a narcissist. Sex addicts don't have flying monkeys. They don't have an army of friends, family, therapists, treatment center, group members, whoever else that they could, neighbors. They're not planting seeds and developing the team and putting poison out in the universe to be directed at you. They're involved in their sexual addiction. They have a lot of shame. Many times they have a lot of empathy and a lot of remorse, but they don't have flying monkeys. That's a narcissist. That's a cluster B person. And when you have a flying monkey in your face, you might as well have the devil yourself rather than his representative. You might as well have the wicked witch of the West instead of the flying monkey. Same thing. Sex addicts don't do that. If you really have some clinical experience you'll be able to tell the difference between your garden variety sex addict and a malignant narcissist. It's pretty obvious, really. The third thing is not only do they have no empathy, they don't have any remorse. Like I said, I had empathy. It broke my heart, the harm I brought to my former wife and to my children. It still breaks my heart. And I had a lot of real genuine remorse. I don't have shame, but I have remorse to this day. My daughter, one of them's having sometimes has some abandonment issues. Fellows abandon her for various reasons, and I'm like, dude, that's me. That's on me. I abandoned the family when you were at a critical age, and I wounded you, and now you're picking these guys who are doing these things. And she's like, oh, Dad, you're full of crap. Your theory doesn't hold water. But I hate it when I'm right. Because however you're wounded, it's going to show up with boyfriends and girlfriends. Number 7, a sex addict, when they get busted, they're not going to generally have rage. They're not going to have moral indignation. For a while, I had a picture up on my mirror and of a scary-looking female borderline, and it had a saying underneath it, hell hath no fury like a narcissist unmasked. And that's what I ran into. I presented myself this past year on YouTube and everywhere as like a guy who was powerlessly shattered. But as I look back on it, I went down fighting. I mean, I was fierce and I was powerful. And psychologically, I put some bruises on this narcissist that she'll not soon forget. And that's probably why I got sent packing with such a vicious grand finale, because I reacted to her in my trauma and with my post-traumatic stress, anger, and sadness and intensity. I reacted to her with the same intensity that she treated me, which was very strong intensity. So in essence, she got a taste of her own medicine, and since she was working with clinical idiots, people that had no clue, should not be treating people, they turned it around to the guy who's set on fire and screaming is the bad guy, and you're just a sex addict who can't help your one little addiction. Other than that, you're a codependent and you're a nice lady. But the real problem is that scary man who's dishing out the harsh stuff. It's so important to get the diagnosis right. The 8th thing is, with sex addicts, there is no grand finale. There is no vicious, well-planned out, dramatic, fuck you grand finale the way there is with a narcissist. June 11th will be the day of the anniversary of my grand finale. All while this woman was in treatment, I was told that she loved me and we were going to do couples counseling. But then on June 11th, I got a letter saying, I never want to see you again. If you contact me, then I will take action to bar you from further contact. That doesn't happen with a sex addict. That happens with a cluster B who's full of rage and who's being counseled by numbskulls. The number 9 trait is therapy makes them worse. The number 9 distinctive difference between a sex addict and a narcissist is you send a repentant sex addict to a good treatment center, They're going to get clean and sober. They're going to be full of remorse. They're going to be humble. They're going to want to make amends. They're going to have empathy. They're going to own their stuff. They're not going to have a sense of entitlement. You send a borderline antisocial personality, a narcissist, to a treatment center, and they're going to play the victim role. They're going to recruit a whole treatment center full of flying monkeys. They're going to be empowered, and they're going to go from the Wicked Witch of the West to the devil himself. They're going to get worse, not better. The number 10 distinctive difference between a sex addict and a narcissist is 12-step work is not going to fix a malignant narcissist. They might go to 12-step meetings. They'll probably run the damn things because they need to be in control and they need narcissistic supply. But as far as really working the steps and really changing their character, I've seen 12-step work change lives. Back in 2008, I went to a meeting. There weren't any narcissistically abused and therefore relationship addicted 12-step meetings in Indianapolis at that time. There still aren't. That's what I needed. So I would go to Sex Addicts Anonymous meetings. And I went one day and there was a fellow there for the first time. And he and I became friends. And his life was a mess, and he had no money, he had a crappy apartment, he was going through a second divorce, he wasn't dating, he didn't have a lot good going on in his life, but that guy did the work. He did the 12-step work. He dug in and he changed his character. He got a hold of his addiction. He became clean and sober, and he fundamentally changed his nature. And he continues to do so. It's not you're cured and you're done. And a few years later, a beautiful, wonderful, kind, non-addictive woman came along, and they're two of the happiestly married people I know now. But that ain't going to happen with my former fiance. She's not going to go to 12. If she goes to 12-step meetings, she's going to go home with somebody and have sex with them. That's what's going to happen. She's not there to do the work. She's there to be affirmed that she's the good guy and the victim. And so you have to be careful on dating sites. You have to be careful in churches. You have to be careful in work settings. And you even have to be careful in treatment centers. And you have to be careful in 12-step meetings, because there are scary sharks swimming in the waters. I went to a great treatment center and was getting the help I needed. And then two borderlines took the place over. Two borderline patients were running the joint. And they ran me right out of there, but not without a fight. So it's really important, therapists, treatment center people, just because you have a hammer, everything isn't a fucking nail. All right? Open your mind up and take in the full story. If you just treat one person, if you don't use a family systems model, an appropriate treatment approach for a sexual addict is to talk with their friggin' spouse and find out what's going on from their perspective. If you trust a psychopathic liar, you're going to get a treatment plan that isn't very accurate. So it's really important to know what you're dealing with. If you're dealing with a sex addict, have them read Out of the Shadows. Have them read the book Surviving an Affair. When I was on a plane headed for a cruise with my daughter, I read Paul Hartman's chapter in Stephanie Carnes' book, A Shattered Heart. And he was making a case that marriages can be saved when you have two people in recovery. It takes two people. It takes an addict who's sober and clean and working a program, and a spouse who's dealing with their co-addiction, who's not playing the victim role. And it gave me all kinds of hope, but I was dealing with the devil. I wasn't dealing with no addict in recovery, and I wasn't dealing with a treatment center that had any idea what they were doing. So how you deal with a cluster B person is call a spade a spade. Right now, these days, when a narcissist comes in my office, I spot them in 30 seconds. And within a couple sessions, I just say, dude, you're a narcissist. You're going to be mighty motivated and have to do an awful lot of therapy to shift the woundedness and the dangerousness of your personality, because you have some significant blind spots. And almost always when you tell somebody that, they get mad at you and they quit coming. And you're sort of glad they quit coming because you were sort of wasting your time. I would rather work with the significant other of the narcissist, of the cluster B person. So in my case, the treatment center should have said, hey, lady coming in here with borderline personality and antisocial personality, you've got some amends to make. You want to be in recovery? Go make amends to that man. And if he's not your cup of tea and you like this other fella, that's fine. Tell him. Have some therapy sessions over the phone and just say, hey, I'm sorry that I was a con woman, and I'm sorry that I hid my real self, and this is who I really am, and that chick that you was in love with, she never even existed. Deal with it. I could have dealt with that, but just the violence of being tossed away like a piece of garbage with the clinical approval of the treatment center was quite a blow to a man who was already destroyed and shattered and broken. So I'm trying to put a shout out to therapists and treatment centers. There's a big difference between a cluster B and somebody who just has a sexual addiction issue. Sexual addiction issues can be huge. They can end marriages. They can end lives. I've worked with clients who their sexual addiction was so ominous and self-destructive that they harmed themselves and killed themselves. I get it. I get how big of a thing it is. I know it's also a national and an international scourge upon our world. But in my opinion, those people aren't nearly as dangerous as cluster B people. They're basically good people who are fighting an addiction, most of them. Cluster B people are dangerous people. They border on evil people. And they do very destructive things. And they need to be treated as the dangerous people that they are. And the significant others, whether it be a spouse, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a kid, they need to be protected. They need to be educated, and they don't need to be ganged up on by a bunch of hateful, vindictive flying monkeys doing the bidding of somebody who is filled with disgust, contempt, and poison. So you saw the less than warm and fuzzy Mark Smith this week. It angers me. It angers me that there are so many treatment centers out there that are clueless. Again, I go to a great treatment center. I love them. I recommend them. I went to them again. But I went the whole week and nobody clinically mentioned the word narcissist. nobody would have a clue what the concept of narcissistic abuse is. And that's not their fault. They're the best. But even the best out there right now, they don't understand the scourge that is in our world of really conscienceless, heartless, empathyless, remorseless, dangerous soul suckers. One person got on my YouTube comments and said, they are calculated mind fuckers. And I said, well said, my friend. So if you have a therapist, have them watch this video. If you have some ins to a treatment center, send this to them and have them watch it. They'll catch on eventually. I'm just afraid a lot of people are going to die of suicide and maybe even homicide between now and then. But for the grace of God and the power of recovery and the power of prayer and the book Psychopath Free by Jackson McKenzie, I probably wouldn't be here on this earth breathing air myself. Sorry, this got a little dark. It's a dark topic. There's a difference between psychopaths and cluster Bs and sex addicts. Hello. Thanks for watching. If you haven't joined our YouTube channel, do that. And there's also, I've got 5 really good books on our website, familytreecounseling.com, and I have 3 good videos on Narcissistic Abuse Syndrome. Thank you for watching today. God bless.